Let's face it, the electric SUV market is absolutely booming right now, and Kia, they've been one of the brands which have been leading that charge. From the EV6 all the way to the EV9, they've shown that they know how to build electric cars that feel well thought out, that are usable and genuinely appealing for people to live with. So where exactly does that leave the new Kia EV5 to fit into the picture? Well, in many ways, this feels like Kia bringing together two worlds. You have the everyday practicality and familiarity of the Sportage, combined with the electric-first thinking that we've seen from their current EV range. And together, for a lot of buyers, that could be a really compelling combination. Hi guys, welcome back to Auto Social UK and a very Merry Christmas from me. In today's video, I'll tell you everything that you need to know about the EV5. And if you want to give me an early Christmas present or a late Christmas present, depending on when this video goes out, then make sure you go ahead and hit the subscribe button. First of all, however, I want to tell you where you can buy one of these. So if you want to see the Kia EV5 for yourself or book a test drive, then the team over at Allen Motor Group come highly recommended by me. With Kia dealerships in Rayleigh, which is where I've got this car from, Brentwood, Milton Keynes, Solihull and Bath. The first cars have just started to arrive, and I'll leave all of the relevant links and details in the description box down below. First of all, however, I think we need to talk about where this EV5 does sit in the lineup. So in terms of positioning, the EV5 slots neatly between the Sportage and the sporty EV6. It's a mid-sized electric SUV which is clearly aimed at families who want space and comfort without stepping up to something as large or as expensive as the EV9. So physically, the EV5 measures at just over 4.5 metres long. It's actually close to 1.9 metres wide, and it stands at around 1.7 metres tall. The wheelbase is approximately 2.7 metres, and this is important because that's where you get the real added space. So it's a little bit bigger than the Sportage all round, but that longer wheelbase, that's where all the interior space is. And I'll show you that in a moment because this really is practical for families. In terms of design, well, it pretty much has that really distinctive Kia look, doesn't it? I found it really interesting that when the EV9 first came out, it was really radical. It was a big change, this really boxy shape that we'd never seen from a mainstream brand like Kia. But now, we've gotten used to it, haven't we? We've seen it on the Kia EV3, and now we're seeing it on this, the larger EV5. You have that star map lighting signature, which just frames that boxy silhouette. I like the way that it pushes the edges of the bonnet and makes it look even wider and more asserting than it already is. It has a very boxy stance, this car, and from the side profile, I almost get a hint of BMW, and that's no bad thing. It's clear that Kia has been going after those premium rivals for a while now, and it certainly holds up when it comes to styling, especially finished in this all-black GT Line S trim. I also love that curve in the bonnet as well. It might be very simplistic in its boxy shape, but it certainly has quite a lot of lines and edges and curves. I really like the detailing around the wheel arches. They're just a little bit different and all finished in gloss rather than contrasting matte black like you get on some of its rivals. Now this car sits on 19-inch alloy wheels. The entry-level Air gets 18-inch, and then the GT Line and this GT Line S both get these 19-inch alloys as standard. You get standard features like the pop-out door mirrors, and if you go for the higher spec trims, you also get the blacked out windows, which once again are really helping to make it look very smart and stylish. Now around the back, this is where I'm not quite as convinced. You have that completely flat back like we've seen on some of the other products from Kia. You also have lighting signatures which once again just wrap those edges. But it's not quite as stylish as it is around the front, but it is practical, which we'll talk about in a moment. When it comes to UK specification, Kia has kept the lineup for the EV5 refreshingly simple, or slightly limited, depending on how you look at it. See, in the UK, every EV5 uses the same 81.4 kilowatt-hour lithium-ion battery, and that's paired together with a front-mounted electric motor, producing 214 brake horsepower. That means that there's no choice of smaller battery here, and there's also no all-wheel drive option either. It's front-wheel drive across the range. And that is worth pointing out, because in other global markets, the EV5 is offered with both a smaller battery option and also all-wheel drive, giving buyers a bit more flexibility depending on budgets and driving needs. Kia has clearly decided that for the UK, the single battery and single motor setup makes the most sense. On the plus side, however, that simplicity makes the buying process very straightforward, so you're not agonising over battery sizes and drivetrain choices. Instead, you're choosing based on trim level, equipment and price. But if you were hoping for a cheaper entry point or the added traction of all-wheel drive, then unfortunately these options just aren't on the table for UK buyers. Now, charging is something which I think Kia have made a rod for their own back with, because when they introduced the EV6 and also the EV9, it sat on a platform which is able to accept charging of over 200 kilowatts. In fact, it was one of the quickest on the market, with only really Audi and Porsche being able to do it slightly quicker. But then they introduced cars like the EV3, the EV4 and now this EV5, and they sit on a slightly different architecture, 400 volt, and that means that charging is limited to just under 150 kilowatts. Now, that's still pretty average within the range of cars available, and many cars like Stellantis have always only been able to charge at 150 kilowatts. But it's a bit disappointing because it means that you can't top up quite as quick. But if you do find a rapid charger, then it's going to take you around 10 to 80% in about 30 minutes. So it's really not that bad, and it can actually maintain that charging curve a little bit better than many of its rivals. It's also fitted with an 11 kilowatt onboard charger as standard as well. So if you've got a home charger or work charger quick enough, you can top up full battery or 10 to 80% in around 7 hours. But if you've got a standard wall box, which is usually limited to 7 kilowatts like I've got at home, then that's going to take you a little bit longer, probably closer to 9 hours. These are pretty average across the range of cars. They're just not class leading. But what I will say is I do really like the fact that this car comes with an electric charging port. It just feels a little bit higher quality. Now, in terms of range, Kia quotes up to 329 miles on the WLTP cycle for the EV Air, the entry model. Move up to the GT line or this GT Line S, and it is kind of reduced slightly to 313 miles. And that's largely due to the bigger wheels and the sportier styling rather than any mechanical changes. And it's also worth being very clear on efficiency figures for the UK buyers. So a heat pump is not standard across the EV5 range, and instead it's an optional extra just on this GT Line S. Now, the heat pump is designed to improve cold weather efficiency by reducing the energy required to heat the cabin, and if winter range really matters to you, then probably this specification is worth going for, but it is going to get rather expensive. Now, I have mixed opinions when it comes to this interior, because from the exterior I very much feel like it keeps up with the likes of BMW and Audi, but inside you start to notice some cheaper materials used. But at the end of the day, they've got to save their money somewhere. But the price tag is pushing over £40,000, so really I don't want to see quite as much plastic as I have in this cabin. But that being said, they have used different angles and different colours to brighten it up slightly. Now, this is the top spec GT Line S, so you do get this really nice two-tone steering wheel, and you also get the two-tone leather seats. You get those from the second trim up, the GT Line. This GT Line S, you'll see that they're slightly sportier, despite this car not really having any sporty credentials. It's definitely not an unattractive cabin. I love the fact that you have these two sweeping screens, and these are some of the best systems out there. I really like the Kia screens. I think they're about 12.5 inches each, and then you also have this section in the middle, the climate control. This has been heavily criticised, and that's because the climate control sits behind the driver, and that is annoying, but you can extend it by pressing the button in the top corner, and then that will bring it out a little bit wider and it's slightly easier to use. However, you do have some shortcuts, which is fantastic to see. So you have a temperature button here, and you also have the fan speed there as well. And we'll talk a bit more about the infotainment system in a minute. But in terms of layout, it's once again very family friendly. So you have tons of storage kind of popped around this cabin. Starting with the armrest, you've got a little bit of storage inside the armrest. You've got these pop-out cup holders, which are pretty great, although I will say they don't hold a smaller can. Maybe I just have a Red Bull addiction. But if you do have smaller cans like Red Bulls, they are going to slightly rattle around. You also have some wireless charging in here, which will fit even the biggest phones. And with this being the GT Line S, I even have a little fingerprint scanner. So if you want to go completely keyless, you can in this car. There's also a huge amount of storage underneath this centre console. This is what EVs are so good at doing. And if I take my handbag, this will fit perfectly. In fact, it could even fit a bigger handbag down there. You can fit that in that storage section down there. There's even a little hook as well. So if you wanted to make sure that items don't roll around, if you're popping a handbag, you can kind of hook it into place there. There's also charging here. So you've got 2 USB-C chargers as well as the 2 in the rear. The steering wheel I love. Lovely physical buttons on the steering wheel. They're really easy to use. And you've also got nice heavy weighted paddles behind the steering wheel for your regen as well. You've also got physical dials for all of your wipers and your lights. That's all really easy. And then you have got controls for your gears behind the steering wheel, which you get used to very quickly. You just need to remember that there is an on-off button there. But once again, an on-off button is my preference compared to these cars which just use your bum as the on-off switch. So let's take a look at that infotainment system in a bit more detail. If you've played around with other Kia products before, you'll be pretty familiar with this screen layout, and that's no bad thing. It's very simple but also feature-packed. Here you have things like YouTube. You also have games, pet mode, relax mode, car wash mode, weather and sports. These are many features that this car's rivals do not even include. And the pet mode is a first for the EV5. It sets an ambient temperature within the cabin so your pets are nice and safe. You also have some physical buttons just down here, or at least touch sensitive. These are built into the dashboard. They look very sleek, but they make it easy to shortcut navigate to some of your favourite features like the home or the map or even your media. And you also have a little star which you can set to your own personal preference, like you see here, Wi-Fi hotspot and many other functions. It makes using this car very, very simple. Now let's talk about some of the design details within this cabin. You have this etched out dashboard, which personally I think looks great. And you also have ambient lighting, which just surrounds the cabin. And this is also interactive depending on your driving styles. For instance, when you switch to sport mode, this will change to a sporty red. But it also indicates when somebody is coming up in your blind spot. And talking about blind spot, with this being the GT Line S, if you go into drive and then you indicate, that's the wipers, you indicate, then you get a display of what is behind you in your blind spot, also for the other side as well, which is a really handy feature that they've had on Kias for a while now. Now on the road, the EV5 is very much tuned for comfort and refinement rather than outright driving excitement. Power delivery is smooth and predictable with no aggressive surge, which makes it quite easy to drive around town, and it's still pretty relaxed on longer motorway journeys. The steering is light but accurate, and the suspension actually does a really good job of dealing with poor road surfaces. The EV5 feels stable and settled even at higher speeds. It's not trying to be sporty like the EV6, that's absolutely intentional. This is a car which is designed to be calm, easygoing and confidence inspiring, especially for drivers who may be new to electric vehicles. Just like lots of the other EV models, this car is fitted with regenerative braking, and it can be adjusted using the paddles behind the steering wheel. So you've got a plus and a minus, and you can toggle through those, and there is actually an I-pedal mode as well. So this is very almost your one-pedal driving, but it won't quite bring you to a complete stop, which is a little bit of a shame, but I do like the fact that you can tailor it to your own preferences. As you can imagine, like lots of modern day cars, this car is fitted with a ton of safety features as standard, including traffic sign recognition, and you also have your speed warnings as well. But what I quite like is there's now a shortcut on this steering wheel. So if you hold down the volume button, this actually turns off your speed warnings. You still get traffic sign recognition, which is really nice, but it will no longer bing and bong when you go over the speed limit. I guess the standout way that I would describe the driving experience of the EV5 is going to be familiar, because if you've driven other electric cars by Kia, then it drives very similar. Of course, it doesn't quite have the sharpness that you get of the EV6, but it does have that easygoing attitude that you get from cars like the EV3 and the EV4. But when I say familiar, I'm not just talking about their electric vehicles either. I'm also talking about their petrol cars as well. So if you drive a current generation Sportage, Sportage and you're thinking of making the switch, but you're worried that it's going to be too much of a jump for you, then I think you'll be surprised, because it has a very similar setup to the Sportage. It has a similar weight to the steering. It also has a similar kind of power delivery. Sure, this has the instant torque that you get from an electric motor, so it is slightly sharper, but it's still not aggressive. It's not going to throw you back in your seat. So if you're wanting to ease into electric, I think this could be a good way of doing it. If you've been looking for an electric car which has all the practicality of your Kia Sportage, then you're certainly not going to be disappointed, because in the back here, it's just as comfortable, if not even more comfortable. You have more space and you also have more practicality as well. So I have got loads of legroom and I've also got tons of headroom, even though this GT Line S model has the panoramic sunroof. And because this is an electric platform, you have a completely flat floor, giving plenty of legroom even for the middle seat passenger. But you do have to be aware that centre console does come slightly backwards, so there isn't huge amounts of legroom. I would have actually liked them to move it slightly forward, give a little bit less space for the front passengers and have more space for the rear. You've got charging, which is on the back of the front seats. You've also got a pull down armrest with a couple of cup holders and even some through loading, which is definitely not a given nowadays. You've even got storage in the doors as well, and it just feels very comfortable and well trimmed. I also love the fact that you can use the lever down the side of the seats and you can sit these seats up if you want to give extra boot space, or you can lie them back for a more lounged experience. And even on this GT Line trim, you also have heated seats in the back. And despite the fact that this rear centre console might slightly eat into the rear legroom, it does aid with practicality. So you have rear ventilation, and on this higher trim, you also have rear climate control. But down here you have a secret drawer. Pull this out and you, as rear seat passengers, have access to extra storage, which I think is very helpful. So overall, a very well thought out rear family space, which is exactly what you want in a car like this. And that added wheelbase hasn't just added extra space for the rear, it's also given you a really usable boot space as well. So inside here you get 566 litres, which is really competitive. The Skoda Enyaq is slightly bigger, but that car is almost classed as an estate, and this car has a secret weapon which that car doesn't. We'll talk about that in a moment. But in terms of boot space, you have this really wide square opening and also a really nice load area. You've also got a nice bit of a scuff plate here, so unlike when I drove the Leaf recently and I said that I can imagine the boot would get really scuffed up, here you have plastic everywhere you're going to come in contact with, and then you have already raked off, which helps to kind of aid practicality. You also have a retractable parcel shelf, which is handy, and you've got these little clips that you can move along, so you can really kind of add practicality to that boot. There's also an underfloor boot storage, so you can adjust this boot floor and your charging cables will pop under there. You've also got some charging as well, including a 3-pin plug, which is really, really usable. You can fold those seats completely flat, and you also have little areas which are going to hide any places where things could fall down. So you've got little bits of fabric which just kind of cover that little bit of extra space, which I think is very, very practical. But as I hinted, boot space isn't the only area where you can store items. Alongside the main boot, the EV5 also offers under-bonnet storage, which is always a welcome bonus on an electric car. In the UK, that front boot measures at around 44 litres, making it ideal for carrying the charging cables or smaller items that you don't want rattling around in the main luggage area. When you look at pricing for the EV5, it's easy to see why opinions are a little divided. In the UK, the range starts at around £39,000 for the Air, rises to low £40,000s for the GT line, and reaches the high £40,000 mark for the GT line S. Once you add on options like a heat pump, that places the EV5 firmly in the heart of a very competitive segment. Against rivals like the VW ID4 or the Nissan Ariya, the EV5 sits squarely in the middle. Both of these cars have been on sale longer and are well-known choices, but they haven't been without their own criticisms, particularly around real-world efficiency, especially at motorway speeds and in colder conditions. Seen in that context, the EV5's pricing doesn't feel wildly out of step, especially when you factor in the level of standard equipment and Kia's reputation for long warranties. That said, I do think the EV5 asks you to pay a little more than you may expect if you're judging it purely on performance or efficiency numbers alone. Where it starts to make more sense is when you look at the overall ownership package, the space, the equipment levels, and how easy it is to live with day to day. It's not trying to be the most exciting car in its class, but as a comfortable, well-spaced family EV that feels reassuring rather than risky, I can see why its pricing may work for lots of buyers. So that's all very positive, but there's also one area where Kia continues to stand out, and it's where the EV5 really plays a strong card, and that's warranty and long-term ownership reassurance. So as standard, Kia EV5s come with Kia's 7-year or 100,000 mile manufacturer warranty, which covers the car from bumper to bumper, and it's also fully transferable if the car's sold on. It's still one of the strongest warranty packages in the mainstream market right now, and it really goes a long way for easing concerns, particularly for buyers who are looking at new electric vehicles. But on top of that, the high voltage battery is also covered by an 8-year or 100,000 mile warranty. And Kia are also guaranteeing that the battery will retain at least 70% of its original battery capacity within that 8-year period. That's really important because actually battery health is one of the biggest questions that many people have around EV ownership, and this provides a clear safety net for long-term use. Kia also includes roadside assistance as standard as well, giving you extra peace of mind, whether you're commuting, whether you're doing those longer distances, or if you're heading off on a family road trip. And combined with Kia's strong reputation for reliability and the simplicity of the electric powertrain, there's fewer moving parts, there's less routine maintenance. The Kia EV5 really shapes up as a reassuring option for buyers who want predictable running costs and minimal ownership stress. Taken as a whole package, the warranty definitely feels really well aligned with the EV5's positioning. It's not just about selling the car, it's about backing it for the long term, which is exactly what many buyers are looking for if they're looking to make the jump into electric. So that's the Kia EV5, and I think it's a really interesting addition into Kia's electric lineup. In many ways, this feels like the electric answer to the Sportage. It's familiar, practical and easy to live with, but it's also built on a dedicated EV platform that brings some real benefits in terms of that space, the refinement, and I think everyday usability. Now, this car is not going to be for everyone. The UK only approach of just one battery, one motor and front wheel drive will feel simple for some, but maybe slightly limiting to others, and charging speeds are perfectly usable rather than class leading, and it doesn't exactly have the performance edge of something like its brother the EV6, but what it does offer is a comfortable, well-equipped electric SUV which feels designed around real family life rather than chasing those numbers. Add in Kia's super strong warranty, sensible range figures and a cabin which does actually feel pretty pleasant to spend time in, then the EV5 makes a strong case for itself. Particularly if you're coming from a Sportage and you want to move into an EV without changing how you use your car from day to day. And of course, if you do want to see the EV5 in the metal, or if you want to book a test drive, then the team at Allen Motor Group Kia will be happy to help you out. Don't forget they've got dealerships in Raleigh, Brentwood, Milton Keynes, Solihull and also Bath. I'll pop the in the description box down below. And as always, let me know what you think. Is this the electric SUV that you'd go for, or is there something that you'd still look at elsewhere? Let me know down below, and any questions I'll try to answer. I really hope you've had a lovely Christmas, and I will see you in the new year.